This is what I'm going to talk about, multi-seat licensing and license enforcement in a network environment. Let me frame that a little bit, what that means, what we'll be talking about. It's for those of you who have desktop-based applications where there's a likelihood that you will be selling more than one license into a household or a corporation, and you want to maximize your chances of getting paid for those licenses. One of the problems I ran, I sell exactly this kind of software. Yes, go ahead.
You missed your opportunity to say who you were and brag about yourself.
You really want me to do that? My name is Jean, not Jean, Jean Cyr. I founded Dilabit Software in '97 as just a harebrained idea. The internet was just picking up, the web was becoming big. I put together a very crude web page, and I had an application that I'd written for myself that I thought, yeah, maybe somebody else can use this. And I think it brought in $400 the first month. The other aspect of this that made it possible was these guys next door that would handle my credit card charges. Just put all that together, and the rest is history. I've been doing that ever since. We've put out a few more applications, and all of them are basically of that type which I just described, where it's likely that a company will buy 10 licenses, 20 licenses, a household will buy 2, 3 licenses, depending on the number of computers in the household. And the key word here is networked environment. What exactly is a networked environment? Well, it's pretty much every household these days, because they've got all their computers hooked up via Wi-Fi or direct plug-in, but they're all going through a centralized router. They can share files. You're actually talking about a small network. And corporations, obviously, they run large domains, Microsoft domains, and so on. And the tendency in a lot of cases, and I mean, a lot of times it wasn't malicious, but persons would buy one license and then they would use it over and over and over and over. And this became a problem for me in terms of collecting revenue. So I started giving some thoughts as to what would be the best way to motivate these people to, pay me my dues. And there are a number of traditional approaches to doing this, and let's jump right into those. Unique license per installation. That's one that's...
Sorry to interrupt again, but I think probably the people on back would appreciate it if you move the microphone closer.
Louder?
It comes out of
Does
it.
it come out?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
It's pulled, break it. Yep.
Wireless. Wow. Okay. Here's the first thing we ever encountered is and it still exists today, believe it or not. Some people use this. Is that for every license they will issue a unique registration code, and you install on one computer, you use one of your licenses. If a customer buys 10 licenses, you issue 10 unique license code. One of the advantages, obviously, is it's trivial to implement because it's no different than your single license model. The disadvantage, of course, is it doesn't prevent repeated use of that single license. I mean, if I issue one license, what's preventing me from using it on 10 different computers, unless you use activation where the computer dials home and checks against the database for a number of uses. And that generally is often it's viewed as a negative. That you're forcing me to connect to your server. What if your server's down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in a corporation that might be buying hundreds, 150, sometimes up to 1,000 licenses, it becomes a nightmare for the IT departments to manage these thousands of unique registration codes. They don't like that at all. So, the alternative to unique license code that a lot of big players use is a licensing server. Guys like Microsoft use this, Oracle, you name it. And basically, the computer that's being licensed calls home and says, okay, I'm going to count one of these licenses each time it's applied or installed. Again, very, very simple to manage centrally for an IT department. They have one contract, one license with the company, and the rest of it's taken care of in the back end.
When you say calls home, it doesn't call a publisher. Each individual installation calls the server, the license server.
Every installation will typically connect using, internet terminology. Will connect with a license server, announce its action. License server will record, will count one against the license code. The disadvantages, of course, is it's very impractical in a domestic environment. No household will install your license server on a dedicated PC or even a PC that's up all of the time so that every user can access it. And if you then think about, well, what if I use an internet-based server? You potentially run into a lot of firewall issues. Are they going to allow me to connect indiscriminately to some ad hoc server? Is the internet even available? Some high security organizations may not allow external connections to the internet, period. And of course, firewalls are an issue. They don't always allow you out of their local network. What I'm going to present to you today is something that we developed for our own use, but I'm making available to you. It's not patented. Go ahead and use it if you find it appropriate. And what we try to achieve is a multi-user licensing model that's not going to annoy our users, our IT departments, or our individual customers at home, that is flexible, that's reasonably bulletproof, that will limit maximum concurrent use based on some count that you've encoded in your key. This approach is independent of what key mechanism you're using, who's generating your keys. As long as you have the ability to encode the seed count in your registration key, this should work. It works either within a work group, a traditional Microsoft work group, which is typically used in the household, or it will also work perfectly well in a domain, which is more the corporate environment. They use what's called PDC, primary domain controllers, and set up much larger computer groups. It is firewall resilient, and I'll tell you why in a minute. It is independent of the key verification strategy you're using. We don't rely on, you can impose whatever restrictions you want to validate your keys. These are two independent. Both the encryption you're using or the protection mechanism you're using to safeguard your software is not connected to this, or not dependent on this algorithm. Just a quick table here. This is it's pretty much overloaded slide, but what is required to achieve this goal is obviously some mechanism by which computers within a network, as defined previously, are able to talk to each other so that they can kind of coordinate and say, okay, there's 5 of us out here, or there's 10 of us out here, and my license is for so much, and then you do the obvious comparison. So these are, and of course this is very Windows centric, but in general these parameters could be applied to any architecture. Primarily, we want it to be simple. We don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. We'd rather we'd rather spend time and effort developing our product. It must support, let's see, what did I say here? Yeah, it has to, IPC is exactly that, inter-process communication. It must have the ability to allow PCs to talk to each other. It needs to support broadcasting. What we mean by broadcasting is the ability for one PC to say, I'm here. Send out a message to anybody who is listening that can receive that message without having to implicitly enumerate all the PCs that are out there. That's called broadcasting. I send one message and I expect the underlying functionality to get it to everywhere I want it to go. One nice thing would be to have this functionality supported in a common fashion or uniformly supported across all versions of Windows. We have customers that are still running XP, lots of XP machines. Very few 95 and ME type machines, 32-bit OS machines, but those are still there. And of course, there's all the newfangled the Windows 8 stuff. And of course, it's got to be firewall resistant. That's often a big issue with these approaches. So I've enumerated here a couple of common IPC methods, memory pipes, remote procedure calls, they're often called COM, sockets, and finally mail slots. And if you look at the parameter or the attributes of each of those, they've all got some problem along, meeting one of these objectives of their pipes. Obviously, they don't cross computer boundaries. They're for process communications within one PC. Our PCs could do it. It doesn't support broadcast very well. It's a point-to-point type communication mechanism, and it's reasonably complex. I mean, you don't really want to delve into the intricacies of COM in order to implement a simple licensing scheme. Sockets, well, they're well known. They're IP-based. They do support broadcast to a certain extent, but it's only within the local subnet, which doesn't help you a whole lot in the business side of things. Businesses typically have thousands of local subnets, and a standard broadcast doesn't span subnets. There's an exception to that, and I think I've got a bullet down there that if you're going to use multicast, you could get around this problem, but then you introduce a whole bunch of complexity. And finally, mail slots, which kind of meet all our requirements. They're global in scope, they're simple to implement, and they do support broadcast, and they're very firewall resilient. I'm not sure if I'm getting ahead of myself, but the reason they're firewall resilient is they run on the same underlying protocol that file sharing uses in Windows. And everybody opens the ports. Everybody opens firewall ports for file sharing because it's a basic functionality that's required in a network for in a Windows environment. So here we have, I'm going to zero in on mail slots. There's very little known capability that's been in Windows since the very early days. You hardly ever hear about it, but it's there, and it's dirt simple to use. It's a very simple mechanism. It uses a standard Windows file paradigm. You open a window, you open a mail slot, you close a mail slot the same way you would a file. It can message to a specific computer. It can broadcast to all computers. It is well handled by work groups as well as domains. So in a corporate domain, for example, at Microsoft, which will have tens of thousands of PCs hooked up, believe it or not, on one of those PCs, I can open up a mail slot that's a broadcast mail slot and fire off a mail slot message that will reach every PC in that organization that's listening for that mail slot. Very low overhead broadcasting. It's nobody will ever complain to you that you're hogging network resources or anything like that. It is universally supported across all Windows versions since Windows 2000. Does not support Windows NT. Not too many of those boxes left around. Yeah, and as I mentioned,
I suppose on the home side it would be XP forward.
2000 forward.
Well, it doesn't support 95, 98, and...
Doesn't support any of the so-called 32-bit versions of Windows.
Well, XP would be 32-bit normally.
Well, yeah, that's nomenclature. It doesn't support any of the non-NT family of OSs. 9X family, correct. 95, ME, 98. And, come on. Oh, space bar. In the interest of full disclosure, I'll give you some of the disadvantages of mail slots, and we've just touched on it. It does not support any of the old, versions of Windows. We're quite happy to ignore that they even exist, because there's not many of them around. The message limit...
They're not networked.
Pardon me?
And I would doubt that they're networked, even if they're around. People don't network those machines as much.
And NT4 was, they did a lot. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They actually, believe it or not, I recently got an email that was from a guy that's running a Windows 3.1 work group.
Wow.
They exist, but they're not worth spending a whole lot of resources on.
That's the one guy you found.
Yeah. Well, he had at least 3 PCs.
That's insane.
The message limit size is 424. That's inconsequential for us. The types of messages that we will be sending, broadcasting, and receiving are tiny, 12 bytes. And it's best effort message delivery. There's no guaranteed delivery. In an extremely busy system, there's a likelihood that we'll drop a few messages. In my estimate, that is a very rare occurrence on a modern network. Everybody's got gig E now, and or at least 10100 interconnects and switches rather than hubs, and much better management of their networks. So this is kind of a non-issue. A little bit about mail slots here, and I don't want to get too technical about this, but I thought I'd show you, just to illustrate how easy they are to use, how the file name structure for mail slot works. I mean, you open them, close them just the way you would files. The first part of the file name is either a dot, the computer name, or an asterisk. If you use a dot, you mean me, you mean this PC. If you use a computer name, you mean the actual computer you want to target with the message. And if you use an asterisk, you mean a broadcast. This will go everywhere. The second part is always going to be mail slot. It tells Windows that you're actually dealing with mail slots rather than some other kind of file. And the red part, the third part, is a unique name that you would create for your application. Either a UUID, a 35-character thing, as long as it's unique, it doesn't matter. And all of your, each of your applications should have its own, because the licensing mechanism would depend on this. So that, PC A that's running application ABC will target PC B that's running application ABC. The way it does this is using the unique name. So that's just to give you an idea how simple mail slots are to use.
Are you going to make these slides available after the presentation?
That's a question for the conference guys. I don't know for sure. I know I've signed these away for some purpose.
Yes.
Yes? Okay,
Yes.
There we go. Finally, and I'm not going to go through this code line by line, but it's for future reference. Should you be interested in implementing this, I'll just quickly talk over this algorithm. It comes in 2 parts, basically. There's a 2-thread process. One thread comes up and broadcasts a query message with my computer name in it and a hash of my license code in it and a flag that says, I'm querying. And he broadcasts that out on a mail slot with a unique application ID. And then he goes away. The second part is a thread that runs continually for the existence of the, or as long as the application will run. And he's basically listening for these queries. So if he sees a query for himself, he goes, somebody else is out there that's just like me. Well, for starters, I'm going to check, is it me? I mean, am I just getting an echo of myself? Because I'm listening on the same mail slot and I just send out a query. So if it's me, I'll just discard it. Secondly, he'll say, well, if it's a query, does the hash that's in that message match the hash of my key? And the reason for this is you could have a customer that would, first of all, buy 100 licenses, and then decides he needs 50 more. And you would want to issue a second license, and you wouldn't want the two to get confused. So the hashes on the keys have to be checked. So if it is my key, he goes, he's just like me, he's using the same license as me, I'd better respond to this guy. So he just takes the message, he flips the query bit and says, this is now a response, I'm responding to somebody. He takes the computer name from the message, which is the guy that did the broadcast initially, and he plugs it into the destination, creates a new mail slot using the computer name as a destination, and he responds to that guy. Another thing this continuous loop does is it looks for responses. And when you start up, he sets his response count to 0. He will loop around for about 10 seconds. I think 10 seconds is a good number for a large network for collecting all these responses. Simply counts them up one by one, makes sure that they match. The unique ID is, well, he won't get any messages for unique ID other than himself because they were only broadcast to that unique ID. But he will get hashes that are not for him. But he will check, and if these are my keys hash, he will add one to the count. After about 10 seconds or so, he'll go, well, I have to assume everybody's responded. The count is equal to the number of users, current users of this license. Is it more than the number that's encoded in the license? And if it's more, take whatever action you deem is appropriate. Either send them, give them a pop-up saying, hey, you're using this beyond your seat count, or if you want to be drastic, shut the program down. Do whatever it is you need to do. I don't deal with that. But this actually is pseudocode that represents this algorithm. And oops, I went backwards. And there it is. At the bottom in red here, use count. Loop count, I basically loop, I wait for 1 second. So essentially I'm saying I'm collecting responses for 10 seconds. At the end of 10 seconds, I go, use count is how many computers are out there using my license. And do whatever you want with it. The important thing, however, is not to stop the loop there. You make the decision as to whether you're going to think of this as a violation of your license or not at that point. But you keep looping, you keep listening for these queries, because you've still got to handle the queries from other computers indefinitely. Some other computers may come up next to you and say, are you there? And you want to be able to respond to them. So you make the decision once as to whether currently 10 or more or X number of licensees are running, but you keep on listening for queries because this could be a thing that runs for 2 hours. You've only checked this once at the beginning. You're relying on other copies of your program that come up to do the same check again and again. There's a couple of things you can do to help especially your IT customers, because they're kind of at arm's length from your actual end users. They're IT guys that install this software on a bunch of computers. They don't know whether Joe Blow has copied the license and moved it to his friend's computer. They're not always in total control. So what you can do when you're getting these queries and counting them up is record the computer names. And when you determine that you've exceeded the license count, you can display a list of computers that are actually deemed to be using this license. Now you got to be careful if you're issuing 100 seat licenses, because that could be a fairly long list. But it'll often help an IT department determine which of their computers is actually in violation and correct that situation. So again, not very firewall resilient, because mail slots sit on top of what's called SMB messages. SMB messages are basic packets that are used in the file sharing protocol that Microsoft uses. So there's literally no users out there that will block SMB packets. Simple enough, as you can see, I can show you the algorithm in 2 pages. Fairly well supported across all platforms. The exceptions are any of the 9X series, which there are not many of, and the NT4 boxes. Not many of those left either. And that's it. If there are any questions, I'll answer them now. If any pop up later, there's my email address.
So if I'm following that right, you're counting on later launches of your application to catch license overruns. So you're not counting extra queries of software that's coming up. So you're not taking queries or having something saying he's shutting down.
That's correct, and the reason for that is that I give no indication that I'm shutting down.
Oh, right.
If you were going to, I mean, there's lots of room, and I've given you the basic skeleton here. There's a lot more you can do with this. If you want to send out "I'm shutting down" queries, just decrement the count kind of thing, it would be fairly trivial to implement something like that. I don't do it because some programs never shut down. Some of our applications never shut down. They're Windows services that run indefinitely. So the only real time you can catch is basically at install time, when they install on one too many boxes and it comes up.
Do you have a C code or C++ version you can share?
I do, but I'm not prepared to share it. It's got some of our proprietary stuff in it. Obviously, we've implemented this. Our implementation is in C++. Any programmer that looks at this code will find that transposing it to C code is almost a one-to-one translation. When I wrote down this pseudocode, I basically went from the C code, and I just wanted to fit it on 2 pages, so I had to drop a lot of the semicolons and the formal syntax. Any others?
Well, do you have the pseudocode available that we could download?
I can make it available, sure, yeah. I don't have any problem with that. I don't know, what do you think?
Yes.
Can we get that to them?
Sure.
Today, or, before the end of the conference?
Sure.
Sure, okay, yeah. That's it? Oh, one more.
Yeah, I was just wondering can you tell how this has helped your licenses, or how many people?
It's been very big in the corporate setting. Corporations are fairly fastidious about keeping themselves clean, and largely, I mean, it's not malicious, but we see this fairly common. I'm working for company XYZ, and I've got this really cool app that helps me in my work, and I don't realize that I'm violating anything. I just pass it on to my friend. He goes, "Oops, this is giving me a 'you're not licensed' message. Oh, here's the key. Just apply it." And sure enough, they're okay. They're running fine. And they're not doing this maliciously. They're just trying to help out their coworkers and whatnot. But when the flag pops up, then they go, "Oh," and you can send yourself. You can, there's many things you can do, but the key thing is to raise the IT department's awareness that this is going on. And one of the ways we do this is by that's available again in all Windows platforms, is to raise an event, an application event, a critical event. They monitor, IT departments monitor critical events on their network. This is the standard Windows event log. You raise a critical event there, and they've usually got monitoring programs that draw their attention to it. And the IT department will generally take steps to fix the problem by either ordering more licenses, or preferably ordering more licenses, or removing the offending program.
Just a thought, the program on the user's computer is where the violation will be noticed. So it's going to be some probably innocent user that sees a message that he's overrun the licensing
Mhm.
I guess it would be nice to, it'd be smart to put in that message something about, please contact your IT administrator to.
Oh, well, absolutely, and the answer to that question is different whether you're talking about a household or a corporation. That's why I didn't expand too much on that. At the point where you detect a violation, you do what you think is appropriate, and absolutely, yes. That's one thing you want to do. You want to bring to their attention that they violated the license, and furthermore, here's how they can fix it. You know, if it's a household, you know, go to my website, buy another key, you know, or whatever is appropriate in that context. This is just a generic model. It needs to be fleshed out with usage appropriate signals to the user. Sure.
Does the mass loss, I'm not familiar with, do they broadcast over the internet also on the business go?
No, they're limited to either a work group, if you're doing work groups, or, and there's this new thing, I forget what it's called in Windows 7, home group. It's just a glorified work group, really. It works there as well. And a primary domain, which applies to corporations. It works well in the corporate model. It will not span, you know, it won't go to your neighbor's house.
So if you are dealing with that kind of situation where you want to limit access to the program across
Universally, then you'll have
some license server or something like that.
you'd have to adopt one of these, you know, more intrusive type approaches. Yeah. The intent here is not really to make this bulletproof, but to keep your honest customers honest. It's kind of an 80% or 90% solution. Okay, that's it.
I'm Mitchell, Vincent. K Software is my company. I sell all kinds of stuff. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room has bought something from me at some point. Code signing certificates, web hosting. My desktop software is an invoice software that I don't think anybody's using in here, but that's my main desktop product. I've got a few others, but that's definitely the big one. That is who I am. And I did this talk kind of, can you tell I don't know how to use PowerPoint?
Slideshow or
Yeah, thank you. I did this talk with Brandon Stagg's last SIC in 2010, and I've got slides, but I'm not really going to use them. I'm going to go through a couple of things, and then we're going to talk about it, because it's different for everybody. It depends on what kind of software you're doing as to what approach is best. Everything has pros and cons. So just bear with me for a second. The original title was something along these lines. I've done a lot of different licensing, used a lot of different protection methods, and rolled my own and everything in between. And I know, I think pretty much everyone in here probably does something now, right? Is there anyone that's looking for something brand new, or no? I didn't think so. Everybody's got something. I'm going to run through a couple of commercial examples. You'll probably recognize these names. These are all ones that I've personally used. I'm not necessarily recommending any of them. I'll talk about why here in a little while. The first one, it's pretty popular these days, Win License. It's one of the ones that is currently maintained. Orings.com is where you can get it. It's fairly expensive at around $500, but he does give you a 20% discount if you pay by Western Union. I've done that. It is safe. I have no idea why he discounts that heavily. He's in Spain. I don't know. There's some reason for it, I'm sure. Free updates for a year, subscription at €99. Now, Win License is a very, very, very robust licensing program. It can do everything from hardware locking, company name, smart keys. I mean, it does everything. It also comes with protection system, like a virtual machine that your code actually runs in. So it makes it a little bit harder to crack. The second one is kind of a strange one. It's called Enigma Protector, and it just kind of appeared out of nowhere a few years ago. It's developed according to the website by the Enigma Protector team, which is very clever. No company name or anything. The rumor is that it was actually a crack group that did this software, and it makes a lot of sense actually for that to happen. It's actually pretty good though. I mean, they do a lot of the same stuff WinLicense does. It's a lot cheaper, 150 bucks, 300 for the company license. The weird thing that they do though is they have separate 32 and 64-bit programs. So you actually have to buy 2 versions if you do both. So that's a little bit weird. Free updates for 9 months, subscription of $69 a year to keep the latest version. Again, kind of odd pricing, but. This one is one I've used for .NET stuff. Technically, they do have non-.NET versions of this, but if you're not using .NET, you're probably better off with something else. But it's a really nice .NET-based licensing system. It can do components, it can do desktop software. I really like this one. Logic NP software at ssware.com. I don't know what that's about, but yeah, different domain there. They do pretty complicated pricing, 3 editions. You'll have to go to the website and see the feature matrix. You know, it's limited based on what kind of licenses you can do. Most people will probably want the Pro Edition. It does just about everything. Now this is just a licensing system. This is not protection. It's basically like key generation and verification. You can embed different features in the license codes and check for that using their little API and stuff. It's really easy to use though. They have a source code edition where you basically pull in the class and use it from there. You know, so there's not really a library or anything you link to. They actually do give you the source code for it. So that's pretty cool. They also sell another companion product called Crypto Obfuscator, which with .NET, if you use .NET, obfuscation is very important since you can basically decompile it straight back to source code. And it's actually, in my opinion, it's better protection than these virtual machine type protection softwares. It is really, really, really frustrating to reverse engineer obfuscated code, especially the stuff that this software generates. It's a really good piece of software, the best one I've ever used by far, and the cheapest, believe it or not. Again, edition pricing, 300 bucks. Most people probably want the Pro Edition. And you really wouldn't use this as a standalone product. You probably use it with their crypto licensing product, and then you bundle it and give you a discount and all that stuff. I guess if you rolled your own security, you might want to use this if you're doing .NET though. Code obfuscation, I think everybody in here probably knows what that is. Sure.
When you say licensing, do you mean just like a generation of a registration code, or do you mean authorization, activation system that's...
Both WinLicense, Enigma Protector, and the crypto licensing products will all do activation as well. They are completely full-featured that way. Now I don't think any of them do the hardware like dongle licensing, but the crypto licensing comes with an ASP.NET server you can actually run, and it will issue hardware locked licenses for you if you want to do that. It's really, really easy to use. If you need that, it's a great system because, I mean, they basically just give you everything, you plug it in and you go. It's really nice. Again, code obfuscation, pretty simple concept to make something that's simple look really, really complex. Really quick example right there, JavaScript. I don't know why I chose JavaScript to do that, but the hello world versus, I mean, check out the obfuscated code. It does exactly the same thing, but doesn't look anything like the hello world example. The crypto obfuscator and products like it will do this to entire source trees all at once. And it makes it really, really hard to reverse engineer anything. So it's added protection on top of whatever licensing system you're using. If you're using a commercial one or do-it-yourself one, whatever, it provides a lot of security. So the commercial examples, I mean, what they actually do does vary a little bit from system to system. Most of them are virtual machine or wrapper systems, like WinLicense and Enigma Protector. They're completely post-compiled, so you don't really do anything until you're finished compiling your product out of Delphi or Visual Studio or whatever. It's not platform dependent like that. And basically what it does, it wraps a virtual machine around your executable. So it's not really the same instructions executing, at least as far as like a debugger or whatever is concerned. Most of them do integrate protection with the licensing, and that's basically the protection, is that it runs inside this virtual machine that the users are not supposed to gain access to. So that's more or less how, I mean, there's some encoding of instructions and things that go on to make it a little bit harder, but that's essentially what it does. It runs it in the VM. The communication with these kind of systems, because in your software you still need to check, like, is this a licensed copy? Whatever features you might have turned on or off, you want to talk to the licensing system. You do that with most of these machines by calling library functions. They're actually blank library functions. They'll send you a stub library. You'll use it just like you would any other library. But then when it wraps this virtual machine around it, it goes through there and actually replaces those calls to the real library. That kind of prevents the single point of attack type of stuff where you can just replace some DLL or something with your own functions named the same thing and totally circumvent the security. So it does a little more than that. And again, it allows the whole program runs in this virtualized state, so all of the real code is completely obscured. You can't, if you pop it open in a debugger or look at it, it's going to look like gibberish. It's going to look crazy. Now, the crypto licensing system, as I said earlier, is a source code integrated solution. They basically send you all the source code. You do with it what you want. There's no protection at all. With that, it's just the licensing, and again, that's like serial number generation, validation, that kind of stuff. Some of them are distributed as libraries. Those are the pretty weak ones because that's a really, really easy way to circumvent, to replace the DLL. But the good ones will give you just the source code so you can compile everything together. Again, no real protection, just licensing, and it definitely needs to be used in combination with some other protection or obfuscation system, unless you just want to give your software away to pirates and stuff, which is always an option. There are lots of pros and cons to these things. I mean, and they're different for everybody. It depends. Some stuff is more important for B2B, some not. The obvious pros, the commercial system is ready out of the box. You don't have to invent any of this stuff. And the guys that write these systems know what they're doing for the most part. I mean, you would have to do a lot of coding to get as robust as these systems are. Unfortunately, that's also one of those things that no one person needs all the features in these commercial software. So if you just need one or two, it's not really that big of a deal. But if you need the more complex stuff like the activation servers and all that, I mean, the commercial systems are almost your only option unless you want to spend a lot of time developing your own. It's cost effective. You spend $300 one time. Most of them are royalty free. So if you have 15 products, you can use it in 15 products. It's really easy to do, and it's pretty cheap when you start talking about multiple products. Again, it's definitely more robust. It has everything. I mean, WinLicense can do stuff that I don't even know about, and I've been using it 6 years probably. And the limitations that are there, the systems to check trial periods and stuff like that, they're going to be more robust because, I mean, that's what the guys that write the software do. They know all the tips and tricks and stuff like how to check and see if your computer's clock has been reset and all of that stuff that you may not know how to do. So they're going to do all that for you. And of course, it allows you to concentrate on your software rather than your licensing system. I mean, who wants to write a licensing system? Nobody does. So it's a really quick way to get to the end. The cons, they're easy to crack. There are stripper programs out there for all of these examples I've given you, which basically means some script kiddie can run this software on yours. It pulls the whole virtual machine off your executable, and it's unprotected. WinLicense, unfortunately, as it has gotten popular, it's just really easy to crack. I mean, so if you're really relying on it for protection, you're going to be really disappointed. Now, not that doesn't necessarily matter, though. I mean, it's definitely good enough to keep honest people honest, which is, really the whole point of the whole thing. And a lot of the complex protections, like the virtual machine with Enigma Protector, not crypto licensing, WinLicense. Anytime you're doing complex stuff like that, especially post-compile, it's changing how your program executes. So there's a big potential for it to do something crazy, and it's really hard to test for that. Maybe there's a bug only on Windows 2000 machines or XP with one service pack or another. It can be a nightmare to track those kind of bugs down for sure. Probably the worst problem I've ever had with commercial systems is the increased virus false positives. People that write malware and virus actually do go get WinLicense and use the protection systems to try to obscure that part of the program. Antivirus companies pick up on that signature. All of a sudden, all WinLicense protected programs are now virus or something like that. It's a huge problem. It really is. And the last one, I mean, you're kind of locked in once you start using these things. all your serial numbers are going to be based on their algorithms and stuff, so it's kind of hard to change once you get in there. I'm not really sure if that's a fair con or not, that you can't quit using it easily, but it's still, I mean, I've switched licensing systems in my main product 4 times now, and it's a hassle. It really is. Just a couple of thoughts on your demo mode. Switching to the do-it-yourself licensing. How many people in here do their own licensing, by the way? Anybody? Wow, that's a lot more than I thought. Well, with the demo mode, in my opinion, separating trial and full versions is the #1 thing you can do to protect yourself. You don't have to write any conditionals in there. The full version code is simply not there. It's just not, there's nothing to crack. It's not there. That's hard to do for some people's products though, so that may or may not apply. Some other things I found out rolling my own and doing the testing and stuff, don't rely on date expirations alone. You have to feature limit. Date expirations are probably the easiest thing for anybody to circumvent because, you know, bottom line, you have to store that first run date somewhere on the user's computer, and it's trivial for people to find that out. FileMon, Regmon, all kinds of like kernel mode debuggers that you can't prevent from running will tell people that in 5 minutes, you know, so they can go erase it or change it or whatever and just manipulate it out and get a basically infinite trial version. So you definitely don't just want to have a fully functional version run for 30 days, you know, on some kind of really, really simple check. Because you're going to get people that will uninstall and reinstall or do something crazy. You would be surprised at the lengths people will go to get a free demo version forever. It's insane. If you do time check, you got to time check against external sources. You can't trust anything on the user's computer. Timestamp servers, NTP servers, something like that. If you really, really, really need to know the time or date, for sure, use some external method. And you know, of course, that comes with it all sorts of other problems with firewalls and stuff. But that's why you really shouldn't worry about dates at all, in my opinion. Watermarking and limiting output, that seem to be the 2 things that really work for me. I've sold some PDF software that did some PDF to image conversion and stuff, and I did some experiments where I took the watermarks out, and basically nobody bought it, like literally sales stopped. I put the watermarks back in, and people were buying on the very first day of the trial. So that kind of stuff definitely works. Limiting output really worked well on that product too. Like I support, I think it was 15 different image formats, but the demo version only did 2. You know, bitmap and I don't know, something like TIFF or something like that. So they got to see it work kind of, but it wasn't really usable. You know, they still had to buy it. So you definitely want to use those kinds of methods to promote your full version for sure, because you know people won't buy it unless you make them. They really, really won't. So the serial number system, it is another part of your own licensing system. I'm guessing all you guys that do your own, generate your own serial numbers. Yeah. Does anybody use like a cryptographic system, like RSA keys or anything like that? No? Good, because I tell you not to do that. I'll tell you why later. But my personal serial number requirements when I decided to roll my own were these. Had to be easy to type in. I didn't want to do activation, which my opinion on that's changed by now, actually. But I needed to prevent keygens, and I had to have an easy way to test for a valid serial number without exposing the whole algorithm. And this kind of ties into what Dave was supposed to talk about. I kind of threw this in here at the last minute, so hopefully it'll make some sense. Dave was going to talk about partial key verification, which is a system that I use, and I'm betting the system everybody's using. Basically what it means, it just means that it's not like a password or anything. You don't validate the whole thing. You validate one little tiny part at a time. And what that allows you to do is basically have, you know, X number of ways to validate one key. And you can check different key bytes and different versions of your software. Really throws crack guys off because they never really know what you're checking. And because you're never checking the whole thing, they can never see the algorithm that you're using, so they can never generate their own serial numbers. You know, if somebody does share a serial number or something like that, you can turn that off, or you could release a new version that checks totally different key bytes. So it's a really good system to use. I'll show you what my serial numbers look like. The length is really up to you. I mean, you can use really, really short serial numbers if you want. I chose the same length Microsoft used. I figured they probably did market research there for me, so they know what people will or won't put up with. It's fairly long, but I've not had a single complaint about this. Of course, I went from a 5-line, monster serial name, address, or not, name, company name, key, and all this stuff was included in my serial numbers before, which was really a nightmare, to be honest with you. I don't think I got any extra protection out of it. It's a pain. Nobody knows how to copy and paste, right? I mean, at least my customers don't. I don't know. So the serial number has 3 main portions. The first portion is the seed, which is basically, it can be anything. It just has to be unique. It's up to you what you use. The rest of the serial number is derived from that based on your own algorithm, which is, again, up to you. And the last part's a checksum. That checksum is really probably the most important and clever part of the whole scheme, because the checksum it's a really easy way to check and make sure that the whole serial number is well formed. So like when users are entering the serial number, that's all you have to check. Because, well, you just want to know if it's good form. Because you're not going to do all your checks right at the start. I mean, that's the worst thing you can do when you're trying to protect your software is, the crack guy's going to start up your software and look and see what the first 5 things you do. And if it's, if key is valid, and all this stuff, it's like, well, that's going to take about 5 seconds to get around, So you want to hide that kind of stuff. So you're not going to do your key checks right away. If the checksum matches, save the serial number and go on. Do your key checks in the background later, and I'll show you an example of how I do mine here in a little bit. Let's see. There's more on this. Again, the seed checksum. Here's just one random example of how I'm doing it in one particular software, and that's actually a comment. I changed the actual values in there, but that's a comment from my key generator. I don't know, it's kind of confusing to read actually. The 9th character in the serial, which is the first one after the C, is the 3rd character in an SHA-1 hash of what the first part of the serial concatenated with that string. And then you just pull out the 3rd character. That's it. That's what I did. I mean, it's fairly simple, but it works. You can do anything you want there.
Yeah, but the checksum, is that a single value, or are you using each digit as a different?
You can do it however you want.
Our checksum's only 1 digit. I was wondering, is there an advantage to it?
Not really. I mean, well, a 1-digit checksum is kind of weak, but I mean, when you're doing a positive check, does it match? Does it not match? It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, no, I personally, I think, what is that? I have to go look and see exactly what checksum I was using. I think it's CRC 32, maybe in hex and reversed or something crazy like that. I actually changed all those values so they weren't real, so that's not actually a real checksum.
But it's one single checksum.
But it is one checksum.
Not 5, 7.
No, but you could do that if you wanted to. There's not really a whole lot of extra strength there though, because again, you just want to check form. You don't really care, so you could make your serial number a little bit shorter, I guess, if you just wanted to do
Yeah, ours is only 12. So the digits,
Yeah.
1 checksum.
I see you're cooler than me though. 12. So anyway, I mean, it's more the key bytes. The middle part is the meat and potatoes of this, and that's it. Okay, no more mic. You still hear me?
What?
All right. So the key bytes in the middle there, it's more of this kind of stuff. I mean, you can use whatever algorithm, whatever kind of crazy stuff that you want to make these serial numbers. But, I mean, the more complex it is, the harder it's going to be to guess, because you're going to have to reverse this and check all of this stuff in your software to verify the keys. And the one thing that I did and I actually, when I wrote my own system, I would compile something with it, and then I'd open it up in IDA Pro, I'd disassemble it, and I'd look and see what it looked like. And it was amazing. Does anybody here use IDA Pro at all? Really? It's a cool piece of software. It's a really nice disassembler. You would be amazed. This is the tool all the crack guys are using. So if you think that you're being clever with your software and licensing system, you ought to go get the IDA Pro demo and disassemble your software and look and see exactly how clever you think you really are, because that thing can tear apart most software in 5 seconds. And you can easily tell where all the checks are. You can even dump code inline, execute it, test it, change conditions, like if they find, if license is valid equals 1, you can change that to not equals, compile it and see if that gets you through, the check. I mean, that's how crack guys are doing that stuff, and it's really easy a lot of times, especially if you're doing really simple checks like right when the software starts up or right when it shuts down. Those are the worst possible times to do those checks. So do it randomly if you're going to do it, and delay your action. Don't, if you see a bad key, don't immediately pop up something and goes, you're a pirate. They're going to look for that message. They're going to see where you're doing those checks. So wait 10 minutes or create a file in some directory, and then the next time the software runs, it sees that file and shoots you an email or them an email or blows up their computer or something. Do something bad. Actually, don't do something bad. I'll tell you, when I first did my licensing system, I screwed it up, one of the key checks, and everybody was coming up as an invalid serial number. And so it shut down 200 people, and they all called me, and they were very mad. Rightfully so, but yeah, that's why you don't want to do anything real nasty, like, erase stuff. Just refuse to run or I don't know, modify your output of your program somehow. I mean, it's up to you guys how you do that stuff. This was all supposed to be Dave's talk, so this is not at all a full look at PKV. Brandon Staggs did a really, really good article about 5 years ago on PKV. The URL to it is enormous, though, so I did not include it. Google Brandon Staggs PKV, though, is the first link. That was the shortest way I could tell you how to get to it. Literally, I mean, it's this long. It's ridiculous. That's all the slide stuff I've got. I just want to basically talk about it now. I mean, you got any questions? Because I've done a lot of experimenting with different methods, and all my stuff's B2B, though. And I'll tell you right now, it's way different than B2C, or at least in my experience it is. The difference between when I switched from WinLicense to my own system, because I was really worried that I was losing a lot of business to virus problems, because I got a good number of complaints about that. And all of a sudden the software would stop working for somebody, and their antivirus software would pop up, and they'd call me and they'd go mad. And I'm thinking, if this is happening with the full version, how many people are getting this with the demo version? And of course, somebody sees something like that, they're not going to call you, they're going to go away, right? So, and there was no way to test for that. There was, so I just did it like I do sometimes, and the result was kind of crazy. First, the good news. No cracks whatsoever for any version that I had this protection system. Well, that's great, except that my sales didn't do anything. They didn't go up, they didn't go down, they didn't move sideways. There was absolutely no effect whatsoever. Now, plenty of people were cracking software and using cracked versions, but I answered the age-old question of, would this guy have bought it? In my particular case, the answer to that was a resounding no. Now, that is not the case for a lot of B2C stuff. Anytime I talk about this stuff, I talk about Dan Hyde's story with Auction Century. He was getting beat to death with pirates. As soon as he did hardware activation, I don't remember the exact number, but it was like a 30% increase in sales or something. It was really, really significant. And it's the fight against serial sharing that's the worst almost. And that's the funny thing, because all these protection systems don't get around that at all. I mean, there's no cracking there. It's just somebody forwarding an email out. So that's why I have any software I do from now on is going to have some kind of hardware activation. It will. I don't think it's an inconvenience to a lot of people anymore. And most of my stuff is B2B, so they'll do just about anything, to be honest with you. I don't think they care. But, so questions, comments, anything?
You said in the future you'll use hardware activation? You mean the dongle?
No, just activation, hardware locking. Hardware locking. Basically generate a serial number based on some piece of information from the user's PC, so that serial number only works on that computer. It doesn't matter if he sends it to 800 people, it's not going to work on their machines. And there are a million different kind of easy ways to do that, really. I mean, all you need is the MAC address of the network card or something, throw it up to a web server and get a serial number. You could even use that as the seed for the, for the PKV serial number if you really, really wanted to. You'd have to check that later, but you could do that. But it's worthwhile. I did it in one software, but it never could sell any of that, so I can't tell you if it really works. I never sold a copy of that one. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I was just gonna kind of open it up now. And you got any questions or anything? I'll answer. You have a lot of questions.
Just thought I'd make a comment. We're using PKV in all of Vincent's stuff. And on the server, when you submit high scores, we submit the code. You don't do anything with it other than store it. And it's pretty depressing to
Yeah.
actually look at the list
Yeah.
of codes, and
It
you
is.
can tell just looking down the list which PKB digits we're using and which ones we're not.
Well, I did the same thing with some of mine, and what I did was I integrated a license check with the update check. And I did that for my very first version. I mean, the very first publicly released version, I attached a hash of the serial number to the update call. Now, again, like you, I didn't do anything with it. I just tracked it. And in later versions, I actually added some checking there to where if I got a certain response back from the update server, it would send them to my Naughty Pirate page and all of that stuff, you know. And I've had limited success doing that, but it was really depressing because I got an email every time somebody, you know, it was like license crack detected. I had to turn that off because I was getting so many of them, you know, and it was just really not making my day. But again, you know, in my case, once I prevented all that stuff from happening, nobody extra bought. I mean, so take from that what you will. Now I know games and stuff are totally different. I mean, people will share games, and if you couldn't do that, they would have bought them. So I mean, don't take that to heart and just not do any licensing. You really do need to, unless you're doing B2B. In that case, I don't think it matters.
Unfortunately, with the solitaire games, Tom has to make that call. That means so.
Yeah, that's awesome. You just throw the code and he can do with it what he pleases, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely depressing if you track cracks and see all of them. But yeah, what are you going to do, right? I mean, you got to spend your time doing your software, not really your protection system. I think that's the lesson behind all of it. Make it good enough. You're never going to create anything that's crack proof. And if you ever find a guy selling a license in your protection system that guarantees that, run away because he's lying to you. You know, I mean, he's lying to you. Now,
Have you used Crack Tracker? Or
yeah, Nico stuff. Yeah, I have. That's good stuff. Cracktracker.net, isn't it? I think that's the URL. You can search. It searches all the crack sites for serial numbers and all that stuff for you. It's really good stuff. I definitely do use it. I don't know how much good it does. You know, the DMCA takedown stuff that he has integrated there, it's cool and makes you feel better. So for peace of mind, it's good stuff. Whether it actually affects anything, I don't know. I think where I've been attacked more is on eBay. I mean, there are tons of people selling my stuff on eBay. If you go search billing software on eBay and buy something, I guarantee you got about a 1 in 4 chance of it being my software with a stolen serial number. You can take that stuff down too, but they started getting clever. For a while, they were actually putting my name in the eBay auction, which was really stupid, right? But now it's like, you know, generic billing software 1.0, and they have some, you know, clip art or something represented, and until you buy it, you don't know what software it is. But every now and then, if I see one, especially new, and I'll actually buy it. And a lot of times they're selling it for $1.99 or something too. So that's kind of a red flag. But that happens all the time for me. You know, no licensing system in the world is going to prevent that either. So, and else?